Hi everyone, it's H. Very nice to have you again with me if you are there. So this is a video diary and it is a chronicling and a live experiment of what it is to live with meaning, purpose, integrity, joy, happiness, contentment through a simple task of reading, learning, reflecting, figuring things out. And if you haven't seen my initial entry, this idea came from the fact that I, as an individual, have on an almost continuous loop been open to this idea that life in its very specific realm of the years you are given to live versus the broad scope of existence is actually incredibly hard to do. And we have almost this innate yearning, at least I do, or a desire, something always pushing me forward. And I'm sure there's a lot of biology involved in that, this desire to strive for something, to make something better, to strive to experience new things, the desire or even a belief somehow, which can be quite punishing, that there is a thing called potential, that each of us possess something unique enough, regardless of our circumstances or environment within which we are born. And that potential is always striving to make itself known. It is always that wind behind you, the wind and the sail of your life really, that's urging you on, almost as if you go out into a park or you're literally down the street and you have a patch of grass upon which you tread, and imagine each one of those blades of grass has this voice or this echo, the beating of a dove's wing that's just saying grow, grow, grow. And I do always marvel about this nature experiment because we are really inhabiting a planet. We're hurtling through space. We are a part of a galaxy, which is part of many thousands or millions of galaxies, and there are multi hundreds of millions of stars. And at the same time, we occupy a very specific environment as well, something that feels almost unchangeable, immovable. And of course, if one lives in an environment which has seasons, and as I do here in London, one senses time moving through nature. But I always feel like we're inhabiting nature. You know, it just grows and it just keeps on with its own cycles. It's taught at the very level of the gene how much to grow, to what extent to stay pruned. You know, I always marvel at these wonderful, glorious trees that we have in all our parks. They stay at just that level. They don't exceed the growth. And of course, over time in the evolution of that plant, that tree, they have been trimmed and honed and made to fit in with the human environment. But there is still something highly orchestrated in how nature blossoms and then dies and then gives itself its own rebirthing tool. And that's something that continues on whether we're here or not. But it is that idea of potential, again, of the human always striving at their very local level to be a part of this environment that just carries on by itself, but you to make your individual mark. And I was, this idea is something that hasn't been percolating very, very consciously all of my life. But, one of the things I speak about in my first video entry is my love of books and reading the written word and walking in the minds of many other people, traveling across all swathes of time and place. And that portal of the imagination did to me present a certain type of yearning. It spoke to something inside of me of possibility, but I didn't articulate it like that. I loved jumping in. I was always reading books, and it's something I have continued to do as I've become a grown-up, or at least I've sensed age pressing itself upon me. But I am now increasingly articulating an overt sense of books not only being something I passively consume, but something I should actively be living out almost. And this is not a new idea, it's probably one of the earliest premises of religious text as well, that the religious text is a way to embody and make actual something quite esoteric in many ways, lived truth and experience written down so that it may be disseminated, it may be remembered, it may be reflected upon, and regardless of your views on religion, the fact that the word and literature and these symbols that over millennia have been molded to actually say something that we all universally share, even if you don't speak the same language, the fact that you do speak and it represents something, and you make symbols and metaphors real in how you speak, the words you say and use, is so powerful. And that's what's really been inspiring me recently, to actually be a bit more emboldened in how I live, and when I read books and works, to actually use them as mini experiments, to actually take on those words and how I actually live through action. So the first work I dip into in my initial video diary, and which was the spawning of this idea of evolving the self through books, the written word, or just words, through lived experience, was through the Tao Te Ching, which is a text written in the 6th century BC by Lao Tzu, a Chinese wise man, a sage, a thinker, in the same tradition of Confucius, for example, or Rumi. Highly philosophical, deeply psychological as well, but there is this concept within chapter 69 of advancing without progressing. And in the context of the specific essay, one is talking of military behavior, of the relationship between two opponents, and sometimes it is better to retreat with full information versus advance with less information, because the latter can lead to greater danger in the unknown. But one extrapolates that out into the broader lesson, and that's something that really struck a chord with me, the idea that regardless of the outer accoutrements one develops of progressing in work, in one's relationships, in one's health and sense of well-being, which can be tangibly observed by oneself, by friends, family, making comments, observing how you feel. It's a very tangible thing to sense a sense of strength or weakness, or having greater sense of energy or clarity. These are the real felt truths. But beyond this, there are many things that one can do. And I notice in my own life is that I'm working really hard all the time on myself, within my four walls and all this 360 wall of my mind, which is really indiscernible to anyone else. And even if it's the sort of the four sides of my incredibly small desk just packed full of books. And it's the idea I have, and it was the first time I had it enunciated or articulated so succinctly, the idea of, in the privacy of your own life, you build that workshop, you deck it out with anything that means something to you. It can be any interest you have, but you are that worker, you are that tinkerer at your workshop, sitting, and like the clock worker, or the watchmaker rather, who sits there, just dedicating time, effort, slowly, into something that means something to you. And no one has to see it, no one needs to know how good you are at something, no one needs to know what you're attempting. The wonderful privacy that we have, and the privilege of that privacy, is something I keenly feel. And that's why I think I've always loved the book, because no one else had to be there with me. No one else, they may have had a view of me always reading with my nose in a book and maybe sensing that it wasn't actually taking me anywhere. But my gosh, have I been to so many places that they've become the core of me, and the things I say, the things I think have just become so second nature, because I consume those lessons and feelings and learnings in the privacy of my own mind, my own existence. So that's a reiteration of why I've started this video diary, this video log, so to speak. And I had thought I'd do maybe a book a day. I think that seems extreme, although I could do, and I would love to rise to that challenge. I think what I'm going to do is pick one work and live with it for, say, around a week, something like that's quite arbitrary. But as I share it with you and I discover it myself, to take core lessons, and these are really specific to me, and so I would encourage you always, and any individual, is to always go to a source text or a source speech. And even if it is a translation, and even if it's something bound from a, out of a different time, and it's a different way in which you have to interact with language, say if it's, modern early English, just take the time for yourself. Don't always go to derivative sources. And we do live in a day and age where you have incredible technology which allows you to consume information in a highly edited and almost like a snack version. But a snack can fill you for that time, but it isn't a meal, and actually it makes you a little bit sick. And you, depending on the snack, you can lose a little bit of self-respect, because it's not really the nourishment you need. It's not really what the body is craving. It wants sort of the 5-star energy package. It doesn't want to have something that comes out of a packet. And as you throw them in a brightly coloured packet, and you look at it and you're like, wow, I just ate that neon pink and yellow packet of stuff. And the body might not be saying out loud, I didn't like that, but it will make you feel it. And so as much as there are great resources out there that will almost translate for you and tell you core points or something, I would always say go to the source. Don't take derivatives. It's like learning to play tennis well, and instead of going on the court and practicing with a friend, however terribly, or getting a coach, or taking a racket and a ball and just practicing on a wall, getting your strokes right, getting the angle of the racket just so, it'd be almost saying, well, just go onto the TV, go into the internet and just watch 5 minutes every 3 hours of a game. It can be from Wimbledon or, the Queen's Cup or whatever, the US Open. And that should be enough, actually. You should figure it out from there. That's probably all you need to really develop your game. It's really not the case. You can do both. And I think both are wonderful, to have an external source that can dissect something for you and give the high level points. But you actually have to experience the thing. You actually need to delve into something. So that's what I'm taking as my lesson already, just from starting with one work and one video diary, is that I actually want to focus on the source itself. I don't want to have other people's versions of something. Again, this is something I am doing, so that's why I'm saying you should also do your own research. And I want to talk about this second work, which has been important to me, and it's an essay which is called How to Live on 24 Hours a Day by Arnold Bennett, who was alive during the Victorian period, going into the Edwardian period, born in around the 1860s, 1867 I believe, and then he passed away just before the 1930s came to be. And this is the essay that I discovered serendipitously just through looking online at some recommended reading lists, and it's an incredibly short essay. It would take you, I would say, no more than 20 minutes to read in one go, and it's precisely dealing with this idea of time. How does one approach time? And I talk about this in my first video diary as well, is the fact that time is made silent. We do perhaps wear watches, decreasingly so, because we have them on our phones, but it's almost that sense, that scene in Hook, we know the character Hook and Peter Pan, the single most sound or experience that viscerally Hook cannot bear is the sound of time passing. It is the crocodile, which is emblematic of this sort of underbelly of life, this dark side of life, which is ferocious and tough and painful, and ultimately represents death. But it is that clock, which is in the belly of the beast, that Hook cannot bear to hear. And in our day-to-day life, that sound of time passing has been silenced. And we do, I don't have generalities, but there are many conversations I will always have a sense that time is passing quickly, or I cannot believe it's been a year since, I cannot believe it's been this long since, fill in the blank. It's because we don't hold time by the scruff of its neck. We don't try to pin it down, and I don't even know what that means, but it's almost okay that we just allow time to slip on because it's not in our face. It doesn't. We don't hear it passing, And that's why I've almost recently, it's really strange, I've taken on this habit of listening out for time. And often this is the form of a church clock and the bell of that clock, which goes off obviously on the hour. And one of the things I love to do, and sometimes I don't catch it, actually I'm not close to a church, I'm not out, but if I am out and I hear it and I'm quick enough, I will start to count the toll of that bell to see if I know what the time is. And I don't know what it is, but I find it so incredibly fun, and almost as if it's some kind of secret pact between me and time, and sort of winking at me in a very cheeky way. And I love the fact that churches still do this. This tradition started when time and watches and timepieces was not a universal. It wasn't given, just like literacy and numeracy was not a given. Not every individual was schooled, was educated, hardly at all, to be honest. And that one connecting sound that resounds through a small city, a big city, a tiny town, a hamlet, but all shall hear that time and know that time shall pass and is passing, is incredibly powerful. And this is what appeals to me to this essay, and I have it here in book form, but you can get it online as well. There is a website dedicated just to this essay. But this is a piece of writing from Arnold Bennett that I think would be helpful for individuals to read, because it makes something we take for granted quite serious, but in a way that I find exciting. And one of the overarching themes for this book is how to make more use of one's time. And I know we live in this day and age of hyper-productivity, that we can hack our way to optimal living, but this isn't really what Bennett is talking about. The broad thesis of this essay, which I love so much, is reframing what we conceive of as work. And work is something that we have had in a systematic form from, I would say, the Industrial Revolution, if we're looking at the history of the West or of Europe. One could say it has been earlier in the form of farm work and the Agrarian Revolution, but this sense of being a set time, a set place, a mechanized activity has been something that is a relatively new phenomena, but it's something that we all allow ourselves. If one can talk about what do you do, it's one of those conversation points when you meet someone new, and it's a given that you are leaving the day early in the morning and you return at night having done work. It's just something we universally allow, we respect, we believe in working hard and, earning our way, earning our keep, which are virtues, of course. But it's almost a get out of jail free card, because we've devoted time to something which is valuable. It does actually denote true value, because you are exchanging your time, effort, energy, knowledge for money. So that's what we perceive as value. But it's such a shame, because what can happen, and what Bennett rightly diagnoses, is that the rest of those 16 hours, outside of the 8 hours of work, and it can be shorter or longer, whatever, 7, 10 hours, is that the rest of life is seen as a prologue to work, those few hours in the morning, and the evening is simply an epilogue. And that's 16 hours. Of course, one sleeps. But again, it's that moment of crystallizing what habit or pattern of activity one can fall into that was really profound to me in this essay. So that's that broad thesis, is that Bennett is saying shake out of that idea of that the beginning, middle and end is not just that high arc of being at work and then everything else is what falls in as spare change left that you can scrabble about and try and make something of. It's that it all counts. And it counts because all those pockets of time are places where you can do true work based on your interests, based on discovering more of yourself, based on curiosity. And this has been really affirming for me since I discovered this essay. And again, it speaks to universal truths as well. It's not as if Bennett is the first to articulate this. He is not the first to bring this into a tangible understanding for me even. I've read many things and widely, but it's nice to have those reminders in very set terms. Life is not just about work and everything else is a prologue and epilogue to it. Far from it. And I'm not going to go through the whole essay. I just want to go through choice quotes that I found powerful. So the first chapter, and I will go through chronologically because that does make sense, is this idea of the daily miracle. And it's something quite quaint and almost romantic in Bennett's approach towards time. And this is the quote that I really, really love as the opener. You have to live on this 24 hours of daily time. Out of it, you have to spin health, pleasure, money, content, respect, and the evolution of your immortal soul. And he ends this chapter saying, we never shall have any more time. You know, the idea that we're always deferring. I'll do this when, I'll wait until then. We will never have more time. We have, and we have always had all the time there is. It is the realization of this profound and neglected truth, which, by the way, I have not discovered, that has led me to the minute, practical examination of daily time expenditure. So this daily miracle of time, of 24 hours, is something that is democratic, universal, everyone has access to it. Every single person, regardless of time zone, of their creed, of their demography, any occupation one has in life is curtailed by the same framework through every single human life here. It's having 24 hours a day upon which to live. And the miracle is that it renews every single day. You can turn that faucet on of 24 hours. Every single day you can go back to that faucet and it shall come out forth again. Super cool. And then it is that understanding that one must have the practicalities of life sorted, where one lives, how one supports oneself, stability, connection with family members, supporting family members, doing activities pertaining to mutual health and benefit. All of these things really count, and how time is at the moment cut into various pieces of the pie. But there's also that point of looking after the immortal soul. And I love Bennett's use of language, of starting out almost with like a listicle, as if you were making a list of day-to-day things you have to get to. And then, oh, by the way, I have to look after my immortal soul. And that irreverence is something that goes throughout this essay, which is why I do like it too. I love the irony, and he knows he's being slightly tongue-in-cheek, as if he could give you a prescription of time of how to spend it. But this is the premise, the beginning of like, okay, there's this felt experience of time, whether it's a construct, it's on a continuum, whatever you think. It exists because you feel it, you get old, you know that you were different from being a baby to being middle-aged to when you pass away at the end of your life. You know that time passes from sunrise to sunset. It exists, it happens. So how do we fit things in that count? And why should we even do that? Why are we not already doing things like that? Surely we get in holidays, we get to read a good book that we like, we get to good dinners with friends that we love, and we get to spend time with our family, we get to take our children to the park, we get to take them on the school run. Surely we're doing well. But then comes this quote. It is a source of constant discomfort, for it behaves like a skeleton at the feast of all our enjoyments. And here Bennett is talking of this feeling, the feeling of you are every day leaving something undone. And who does not have this? And not undone just because you didn't get to everything on your list for that day. You didn't get to every task you had hoped for in your work day, in your errand list. But that nagging sense that, oh, the thing I thought I would do, I would make time for that. I'd go for that walk, or actually I'm going to follow up on that recommendation that a friend made of what I should go see. Or just that nagging feeling of, I didn't do it, whatever that it is. Like, I know I could do more, not because it's asked of me, but I just know it gets out of potential and it kind of just follows you around. It's like almost like a deflated hot air balloon. And it's kind of weird because it's invisible, like Harry Potter's invisibility cloak. And it just kind of drags behind you. And you're fine, and no one else can really see it. That's why it's the skeleton. It's unseen, but it keeps you up. And it can actually keep you up at night thinking about it. And it's just something that's quietly there, of just a series of things that have been left undone. And how I like to see it, and it's tangible for me, is that I have all these books around me. I have notebooks, and I have countless notebooks I've started and stopped, and even journals. And there's always these whisperings of things that you never finish. And that's something that Bennett is highly empathetic to and really nails it. For anyone who says, I get enough done of what I want, it's like, well, do you ever have that nagging feeling? Like in the quiet, as you sit or as you think, 3 seconds on the commute, there is something deep inside which is just silently knocking, and you do not get to it all. At least for me, that's something that exists. And then I think that's the same thing that levels all, apart from the 24 hours of time, is that sense of, am I missing something? And something quietly whispers, yes. And then you ask, but what? And you don't always hear the answer. And this is Bennett taking this head on. And then the rest of the essay goes into a very tangible treatment of time, units, 2 hours in the morning. How do you spend that? What do you do? What's that mindset? And in the evening, what do you do? What's your approach once you get home? And one of the things that I think is important that he talks about is this concept of arranging a day within a day. The day is not just the work day, it's not just the day off. It's having almost like a Russian doll, and you can just keep opening it and more smaller versions continue to expose themselves. Same thing with a day. And when you have like an incredibly fun, full day, you do some crazy activity, you go out some incredible food, you have some wonderful laughs with friends, and actually those are a series of moments, almost like in a concertina fashion, that are moments built upon moments built upon moments. And that's what Bennett says is the key piece on approaching this idea of work as well, is that have a day within the day within the day. The morning is one section of you to do your own work, your own program of interest, whether that's something Bennett talks about is, going into the reads of poetry because it's cognitively demanding versus reading a poem, reading a novel rather. But it can be anything. It's just like, no, I've got work to do. And you take it so seriously, you treat it sacredly. When someone says, oh, do you want to go hang out? Should we go for a drink at the pub? Sometimes you say yes, okay. Sometimes like, what, I actually have to get back, I've got work to do. And often I get this a lot when I say this, oh, I cannot make it, or I do have to leave now, or that sounds like super fun, but, or just simply just say, no, thank you, but it's wonderful you think of me. I've got some work to get on with. I'm in the middle of something. And someone will say, well, you finished work. What else is left? To which I say, the end of the work day is simply the beginning for me. And the beginning of the day is almost the end of one chapter of what I was thinking about the previous day. And so the concept of time is super fluid because of that. And that's what Bennett does. He says, treat your program of study. So whether it's something you want to be learning in a book, or whether it's something intro to programming, whether you want to actually read one classic in the year and you're like, okay, well, I want to read a page a day, or I want to read a chapter